This podcast is part of the Pull Up a Chair podcast network. Let's build community through connection, conversation, and collaboration.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty. Man, we just putting on a show.
Hi, I'm Jake.
And I'm V,
And you're listening to the It's Working podcast.
where we take deep dives into mental health, breaking stigmas, and starting conversations.
Oh, you know, I try to find a purpose in my life to drive me, to guide me. Oh, doctor, I feel dead inside.
We are not healthcare professionals, and our opinions should not be taken as facts or as medical advice. To see any sources, resources, or study we speak about in this podcast, please check out our website, linked in the description of this podcast. If you or a loved one is struggling, there is hope and there is help. Some helpful resources can be found on our website, linked in the description of this podcast. It's Working Podcast is a production from the Pull Up a Chair Foundation. All opinions in this podcast belong to our hosts and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Pull Up a Chair Foundation. Hey guys, welcome to this episode. I really want to start off by saying I am not attacking anybody who believes in a religion. And I never want to condescend when I'm speaking. I'm very fascinated with it. Neither of us are here to convert anybody. It's just an open discussion on religion, how that impacts mental health and human lives.
That's right.
So we're going to do our best to be respectful of everybody. You're not here to hurt any feelings, step on any toes.
Yeah. I think my goal for this is to share my experience and hope that there are listeners out there who might relate and then speak a hopeful message in it. Because I know it was a really difficult thing encountering this at a young, vulnerable age, like very, very much still like finding my step in faith.
Yeah.
And then figuring out how to proceed from that, and then still ultimately choosing faith. Is very interesting, very awkward at times, but I'm still happy with the life that I've chosen to lead, and so yeah, I think that's my goal here.
Yeah, and then at the end, I will talk to you guys about some interesting ways that religion influences psychology, because I have a particular article that came up when I was researching this, because I don't have religious trauma at all. So this is not something I could personally relate to. So I did research because that is what I'm good at. And that'll be a conversation for later. But for now, the conversation is, what was your experience like, Jake, with religious trauma?
Oh boy. Well, let's dive in, shall we? Around the ripe age of, I think I was 17, I was a part-time student in high school, and I was also a part-time student, I was also working part-time for the city in a daycare program. I got really into my family's church that we had just been going to at the time. I'm not going to name the church, as I don't want to speak disparagingly of the body, but yeah, so... the church that I was going to, the pastor that ran the church was the Allure. He was very charismatic and...
Do you want to give him a nickname for the podcast to make discussions easier?
A nickname for the church? I am going to say the name. I was just about to say the name.
Okay, let's call them the Church of Foxiness, because I see a fox in front of me.
The Church of Foxiness. Okay. So the Church of Foxiness that I was going to, the lead pastor was very charismatic, and I remember that was like the point that like really like got to me, was like, here was this guy who would get up on stage and like he would jump and he would like yell, and he was very passionate about what he was speaking about. So obviously it was like, oh man, this guy.
So kind of like televangelist?
Very much.
Okay.
Very much so. Like
Joel Osteen level.
Oh, don't say that. We're gonna get into it.
We'll get into it.
Mm-hmm.
We have to turn this episode into a two-parter. We can turn this episode into
Okay. Yeah. I have opinions on that man.
Okay, maybe we just we'll start here. Let's continue on.
Mm-hmm.
Let's can't call your pastor then, Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger.
Yes.
So Pastor Mick Jagger of the Church of Foxiness. This works way too well for like it just being thrown together. I then was looking for ways to be a part of it.
Yes.
The kids ministry pastor at that time, I was part of a small group with her sister, and the sister had overheard that I worked in a daycare already.
Yeah.
And so scouted me and thought, oh, well then he would be a great candidate for kids ministry because that's our age group. So they invited me to work with them one Sunday, and then their favorite part of the story is they never actually invited me back for a second Sunday. I just showed up, and they didn't say anything, and I just kept showing up until eventually I was there full time every Sunday.
That sounds very you.
It is very me, and that was good. I enjoyed that. This leader in my life was very helpful to my growth as like in my faith, and then also like just in leadership practices. Like I look to them as like a sort of like the goal.
Okay.
And then secondary was the Mick Jagger figure. Because eventually I wanted to get to that level of being able to speak to groups so comfortably and so passionately about my faith.
As flamboyantly too?
Maybe, potentially.
Okay.
Potentially. I don't know if I would say his style was very flamboyant, but perhaps in a light. I found myself offering to be part of an experimental program.
I don't like the term experiment.
Well, here's the thing. We had never done this before, and it was definitely like a guinea pig scenario where the goal was to take members of the church and put them through an intensive 1-year program to then become certified ministers.
Oh, okay.
So this was the Bible schooling that I mentioned briefly. It was going well. It was difficult for sure. Like, I mean, it was like boot camp for the Bible, but about 6 months in, the person who was leading this program had decided to move on to a different church. Red flag number 1, by the way.
Yeah, okay, so we got a flag.
That's red flag number 1, and I did not see this, but decided to go to another church, and then no other like board member decided to pick up that program, and so it ultimately fell through. Part of this program was you had the schooling, but then you also had service hours, because both of those things you needed to become certified. So I was working in the kids ministry, but that did not count towards service hours, apparently. So...
Well, what were the point of service hours?
Red flag number 2.
Okay, red flag number 2.
Kidsmen definitely should have counted towards service hours. However, Mick Jagger felt otherwise, because I was already doing it every week, and we needed to put something on paper that was like just as experimental as the program, right? Which, now that I'm thinking about it, does not make sense, because you would think kids ministry work would count towards like certification. But
I mean, yeah.
he managed to finagle another arrangement, which was I was now coming in during my free time during the week, and I was helping clean the church. Like, basically, I became the maintenance guy for the church.
But how... Okay. There is no real answer to the question I was going to ask.
There's not a good one for that question, no. So what started out as a weekly commitment on Sunday became Tuesdays and Thursdays coming in and rearranging the chairs, cleaning the bathrooms, vacuuming the sanctuary, and helping fold the handouts for Sunday service. Occasionally when my leader needed help on that. And then there was youth, the youth group. Youth group needed help. And I was already there so often, I figured, what the heck, I can come in one more day. I can sacrifice Wednesday evenings. That'll be fun.
I don't even ask you that much, and we have a podcast together.
Exactly. No, I was in it. So then that's now 4 out of 7 days, not including... No, that is including Sunday. 4 out of 7 days where I was at the church almost for, like, work day hours. Like, I don't remember a time where I wasn't spending anywhere between, like, 4 to 8 hours at the church at a time.
That's, like, a whole-ass job.
It is a job. And I was doing it for the kingdom, and I was doing it for my service hours, which I'm pretty sure at that point I should have hit my cap about a month or two in. I continued to do this even after...
But you were a child. Like, let's reestablish this. You were 17,
mm-hmm.
You were a minor, you were a child.
Mm-hmm. And this was over the course of years, though. So I don't think I got into that program until I was 18, an adult. And then I continued to do...
Not that it's much better.
It's not.
But...
It's not better. I continued to serve even after the program had fell through for about another year and a half.
So that 1 year program turned to 2 years?
Yeah, darn near.
That's like a college scam.
And during that time, I would watch more leaders leave the church. And again, red flag number 2 that I just wasn't paying attention to. And it didn't hit me that maybe because they're leaving, I should consider leaving too. No, in fact, it just lit a fire under me, and I was determined to work even harder and keep the church going because I believed in the mission.
Oh no. Oh no. Like that stupid TikTok thing.
Yeah, basically.
No.
It was not great. Eventually, my mentor in the kids ministry, she also moved on. And
so you just had Mick Jagger.
I just had Mick Jagger. But before she did, bless her heart, love her heart, as she would tell me. Love her heart, not bless your heart. Because bless your heart is kind of like an insult, actually.
Okay.
Bless your heart is like, if you're from the South, apparently bless your heart means like, oh, she don't know better, bless her heart. But if you say love your heart, it is an appreciation.
I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And now I have a new insult to throw in my Arkansas grandfather.
There you go. So she left, but before she did, she managed to land me a stipend through the church for all the work that I was doing, because I was basically an employee.
That's awesome.
Right.
Way to go. She rocked.
Give me a second, because I'm setting up, I'm getting ready to spike. That stipend would have lasted 2 months.
Oh.
And then Mick Jagger goes in front of the congregation during a Sunday morning and says that the Church of Foxiness is falling on hard times financially, and that now more than ever we need people to give, and give like they've never given before, because we're losing.
That's a red flag.
It's a red flag number 3. And I gave up my stipend. Because I felt guilty taking money from the church when it was falling on hard times for doing this work, when I could just be doing it for the rewards that I send up to the kingdom for my acts. So I remember having that conversation with him and being like, hey, I was praying on it, and I think I'm supposed to give up my stipend. And he jumped on it so fast, it was almost like he was getting ready to talk to me about that.
Oh, like he prepped to ask, but you didn't have to, because you're just, you're that giving.
Yeah. In the following months, his wife would start to nitpick at the way that I do kids ministry. She would complain if ever she caught me giving a hug to a child, which, for the record, I don't hug like a creep. And I say, no. I say that because there are some people who don't know how to hug children. And that hug, the inappropriate hug that I'm talking about, is when a child approaches you and you don't meet them like with your arms, but like you just sort of give them your hip and you hug them.
Yeah, that can be awkward.
That's a creepy hug. And so that was never what I would do with the kids at the Church of Foxiness. What I would always do is, if I saw a child running to me, I would drop down to a knee and I would embrace them.
Like a human.
Like a human. Like you would a human. Like you would meet someone your size, like, arm in arm. I would drop down to their level. That way I was hugging them and not like side hugging them at my hip, because that'd be really weird. And the optics of that just look uncomfortable.
Okay, so I'm going to remind you of that next time you hug me. You need to get down on me.
Okay.
Because I'm short.
Okay. And yet, this was an issue. The wife of Mick Jagger was always had something to say about the way that I interact with children. She wrote me up one time for roughhousing with a few of the boys from their church, boys of which I was very good family friends with, and the father and the mother of these two boys actually encouraged me to play with their sons like that, because they don't get a lot of that at home.
Alright, so are we talking WWE
No,
wrestling?
not WWE. Okay. But it was a lot of like, lifting and spinning, like airplanes and stuff like that. And
that's not
very wholesome, wholesome. And
of course it's wholesome, it's you.
well, okay. Wait, no, we did a podcast on this already. Thank you. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you beat it last week. See, guys, it's already getting better at it.
There were a few of those incidents, and then at one point when I was brought into the office and I met with Pastor Mick Jagger, he had told me that if these continue, I would be asked to stop serving. Yeah.
Wait.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not.
After everything.
He said, if we don't see a stop in this trend of behavior, we're going to have to ask you to stop serving. And I didn't quite understand that, and I was angry. I think that was like the first instance of me being angry at the way that I was being treated there. I left the room and I went and I had confided in my former mentor, like, why would they do this?
Yeah.
So I started to take off the rose-colored glasses at this point, and I would look around and I would notice how like families were leaving and not coming back, and I would notice how quickly the doors would revolve when it came to administrative leads in the church.
So, like, participants would leave too, not just... That's another red flag.
Members of the congregation were leaving too. And then what's worse was anytime one of them came back or wrote anything about the Church of Foxiness on Facebook, Mick Jagger was advocating for like blocking campaigns. Like he was going to trusted members of the church and asking them to report the comments and potentially try and get them banned or blocked off of a platform if they were speaking disparagingly of the Church of Foxiness.
Another red flag.
Yeah.
I feel like we should have a prop red flag in here.
We should, yeah. Because that's what now? We're at 4 or 5?
Or at least 5, because the one I brought up was 4, so that would have been 5.
Yeah, and per the rules of baseball, you're out at 3, so like, there you go. But all of these things, I stayed an eyewitness, and I would continue to stay, and I would continue to serve, because I was dreading what would happen if I left kids ministry and youth, because these kids and these, these young adults were like witnessing people that were consistent in their life just leave. And I saw each time how that affected them and how devastating that was. And I didn't want to be another person that let them down. There's part of that like trauma right there coming in. It's like, so he had a few phrases, this Pastor Mick Jagger, and the one that he would throw out a lot is all authority is God ordained, meaning that anyone who is an authority figure over you has absolute power over you because it comes from God, and you should always believe them, right?
Oh my God, that's so toxic.
It is very toxic. I actually now hate that phrase. I don't think that's at all how that works out. In fact, in the Bible, Jesus demonstrates very differently what leadership looks like. It's not a parable. It's the story of when he's meeting with his followers, the disciples. The feet one? The feet one, yeah. How he goes and he washes the feet of his disciples, and that is something indicative of their culture in the time that a servant would do. And he was their teacher. And so when he started washing their feet, the would-be servants and the students that he had, they started freaking out, like, Master, why are you doing this? Like, teacher, why are you doing this? And he told them that this is how the kingdom of God works. Like, this is how leadership works in the kingdom of God. It's very much like the upside down pyramid model, where it's like the boss is on the bottom and the rest of the body is up at the top, being elevated and lifted up by the teacher, by the leader.
Did Mick Jagger not wash your feet?
Mick Jagger never washed my feet. I washed his feet quite a few times. I washed a lot of feet while I was there. I don't regret washing the feet of others.
You were doing this out of the goodness of your heart, believing that you were doing the right thing, and to realize that not everybody was in it for the same reasons. I'm sure it was very heartbreaking for you.
Oh, yeah. A lot of people were discouraged in their time there, but that's neither here or there. Eventually, though, I would leave. I would get out of there because I would hit a boiling point where enough is enough. And I think that boiling point was on a missions trip, funny enough, where I would then run into another figure that turned out to be just as similar, but I wasn't aware of it yet. We were on a missions trip, and I got into the back of our van, and I was helping people load up their luggage, and then Mick Jagger comes strolling out of the church after taking like a 15-minute coffee break or whatever while I'm putting luggage in the van. He comes out and he goes, "You're doing it wrong." And then he hops up there and he starts like doing it for me, and I just get so mad. I hop out and I just walk off, and my sister like comes up and is like, "What's going on?" I'm just huffing and puffing. Like, we're not even in Mexico yet, and already like I'm done with him. I don't know if I can spend a week with him in Mexico building a house. I don't know if I could do that. He would then approach me and apologize the next day about like, "Hey, I didn't mean to, upset you, like whatever." And I would just basically, yeah, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not here for you. I'm here to like build houses for like people that need houses. Like, don't make it about yourself. Clearly I don't know how to load luggage the right way, but apparently there's a system.
I mean, if there is a clear system, you should have been told ahead of time since you were being left to do it.
Yeah, that was the other thing, was like, no one asked me to do that. I just hopped up and I did it. But the way I was doing it was wrong. So I would then leave the church not too long after that, and I would find a healthier church. And but then I would start in with some not so healthy leadership in the missionary group that I was part of. Okay.
So What is it? How do you think that being, traumatized by that whole experience has affected your life?
In recent years, I know that there was definitely a lot of like searching for like truth, because here was an example of what I believed to be truth that was very toxic, and I thought to myself, well, that can't be what the model for like what godly living must be then. And then you also, you had mentioned it earlier, like Joel Osteen, like, this professed...
So let's talk about Joel Osteen for a second.
Oh my goodness, okay.
Alright, so everybody who hasn't been living under a rock and is American with a TV has heard or has seen a Joel Osteen commercial. Mm-hmm. He's like one of the most famous televangelists. He's not the only one, because there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
At the point that this podcast actually goes live, it'll be quite a while from now. But people found out he was money laundering, and he literally hid money behind a toilet, like in the wall behind a toilet.
Yeah.
But even outside of that, outside of the the truly legal stuff, there's a lot of shady stuff that goes around people like Joel Osteen because of just the sheer amount of power that it gives you to be on stage with thousands of people watching you and believing that you are the beacon of all the hope and all the holy, and it comes directly from you. And then, God, I gotta look up, I think his name is John Locke. But there is another preacher who is currently doing book burnings.
Oh my God. I hadn't heard of that one.
He's another televangelist.
Of course.
Yeah, John Locke. John Locke is his name. Mm-hmm. And because so many people are looking at this and not like, hey, this is
face palming so hard right now.
Yeah, you are. They're looking at this individual not as, a human being who probably has good points and bad points and really, really bad points about him, but as a beacon to who they believe is their Lord and Savior. And the amount of power that gives you, it can be used for good and for evil. But whenever people talk about religion, and this actually comes into that article I discussed earlier, or was going to discuss and brought up earlier, people don't like to disagree with religion because they think it's a personal attack or attack on the religion as a whole. Like, hey, this one preacher's doing evil things, and they're like, are you talking against God? It's like, no. I'm saying that Joel Osteen is a money laundering, creepy dude who talks about how evil gay people are, but oh my god, do you see the way he talks? I'm not trying to be stereotypical.
Yeah.
But you can't just take that flamboyant culture and make it your own. That's appropriation. And for those who didn't hear, that was me being sarcastic. I don't know how well my sarcasm's being picked up. That was me just being snarky.
Yeah. No, Joel Osteen's a piece of work.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on a televangelist, somebody who's currently Christian?
I don't like him.
You don't like them?
I don't like him. For me, so the money in the wall thing was new information to me. I think I had found that out when you told me the first time. But I was like, I wasn't surprised. Like, of course he did something like that.
Yeah, of course he's money laundering.
The thing that I think cemented my disdain for Joel Osteen was during, I think it was Hurricane Harvey.
Yeah. Oh wait, is that when he didn't let people use his location?
So there was people were saying like, we should open up like the mega church doors and like open up like a shelter for like the homeless and get people indoors and like safe during this hurricane. And Joel Osteen was like, oh man, we can't, like, there's something wrong with the building. But then there were so many pictures and videos of people walking by the church during the hurricane where, like, the lights were on and everything was fine. And, like, I think the heater was on later on. Oh. Like, but the building was empty. And, like, so, like, the lights are on and, like, it's, like, ready to house people, to help people, to save people. And yet he was unwilling to do so. And then after the fact, once Hurricane Harvey had, like, lifted... the church then offered like relief, like they did like food drives or something like that. But in my opinion, that's like way too little, too late.
Too little, too
there
late.
Are people that needed help then, and it was as simple as just opening your doors. Oh, that was the other thing. To make sure that no one got into the building, I think they put like chains on the door handles to make sure that no one could like jimmy the door open and get in. Like, I remember seeing, like, these images of, like, the lights on and, like, heavy chains wrapped around the door handles and, like, bike locked or something.
Oh, my God.
Just to make sure, just to discourage anyone, like, from, like, really trying to get in there, but...
Yeah, that's insane.
And that goes back to, I think, like, the culture of, like, what I believe Jesus stood for and, like, were that his house, I think, Jesus would have been like, yeah, man, come crash. We're all good. We're going to have hot cocoa. It's going to be great. We'll tell stories. Like, I got a million stories I could tell you because Jesus loved telling stories. But, yeah. So when I heard about that, I was like, I'm not so sure you're, like, self-professed man of God. I'm not so sure you're, like, really after the kingdom here, bud.
Well, speaking of self-professed, there's a lot of, like, subsects of Christianity where you'll see, like, mini cults pop up.
Yep.
There's a YouTube channel called Fundy Fridays, who is a Reformed Mormon who talked about her experience growing up in the Mormon faith, which is a fairly popular Christian faith, and about the molestation that happens and like I'm not to dissuade your trauma because what you went through was very traumatic. But the more deep rooted awful things that people do in the name of religion, calling
for sure.
Like, pointing to the man upstairs, quote unquote, and saying that this is my right to do it, which harkens back to what Mick Jagger told you, all authority is ordained by God, and that's something very similar that she heard growing up. And then there's, like, in the atheist community, you hear all these people, like, sprouting out about how horrible all religions are, blah, 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 but, like, they're the only people that feel comfortable enough to speak about the negativity of religion. Yeah. Which brings up that article that I did want to talk about today. So Psychology Today, unfortunately, like, people who use it as a resource is like, it's fine and all dandy. make sure you check their sources.
Mm-hmm.
Because they did put out a article talking about how religion affects mental health. And the article on it was glowing. It says it helps people with major depressive disorder, that it helps people with anxiety, and it's like all these glowing things.
Mm-hmm.
And they sorted one study.
Mm.
And this kind of harkens back to what we talked about last week, where there was a bunch of different studies, but it was only done on college students, and that's just such a small demographic that you can't use that for the world at large. But this whole article from the Psychology Today only points out to one study, and this one study was done by the University of Canada. It was funded by the state, or not the state, but the country of Canada funded it. The point of the study was to look at the relationship between mental health and religion.
Mm.
And in it did show that for mild cases of not major depressive disorder, minor depressive disorder, which are different,
Mm-hmm.
and low symptoms of anxiety, it can be helpful. But the study went on to point out that in certain cases of schizophrenia, it can heighten the disorder.
Mm.
And it also heightened other types of disorders, other types of disorder that leave the patients emotionally vulnerable. It can worsen symptoms. The actual conclusion of the study, I will read for you now.
Mm-hmm.
Many people suffering from the pain of mental illness, emotional problems, or situational difficulties seeking refuge in religion for comfort, hope, and meaning. While some are helped, not all such people are completely relieved of their mental distress disorders. Unfortunately, some are heightened in their struggles. Thus, it should not be summarized as a treatment for disorders. In other instances, individuals with emotional vulnerabilities are more susceptible to harsher, more fundamental religions.
Mm.
But you go to the Psychology Today article talking about how religion is the best thing to give to somebody with a mental illness, and it's like, that's not what the study does. And so I looked into it deeper. Like, is this a regular thing that people will cherry pick? And of course, I should know, yes, people love to cherry pick.
Yeah.
When the DSM-5 was first being put together, there was specifically a lobbying campaign to make sure that none of the mental disorders talked about or touched on religious trauma.
Mm.
There was a fight from a different lobbying group, survivors of the LDS Church, the one where
Right.
girls were married off, raped at 14, forced to
Yeah.
have many babies. So there was a lobbying group of those individuals and a bunch of other individuals who were wanting to bring up trauma caused by religion and religious psychoses and have that distinct from other types of disorders and other types of, because there are a couple studies done about how religion like fundamentally works with the brain and how that relates to other stuff, but that's like neither here nor there.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, here's our proof that religion does affect your brain mentally, so it should be included. But there was a different lobbying group who were like, religion and science should be kept separate. And guess who won out? The religious individuals.
Shocker.
Because if you look into the DSM-5, you will not find a single disorder connected to or heightened by religion, even though there are dozens upon dozens of serial killers and family killers who use the Bible as their reasoning, as their motive.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, see, the devil got to him. That's the thing.
Oh no, God said slay utterly. The fact that there was this discussion of what should be put into a medical textbook
Mm-hmm.
had religion and politics thrown in it, I found it was insane. And it was like, in my mind, it's like, it should be irrelevant. It should just be like, here are the facts, here's your textbook. But that wasn't it. And so I thought back to the last couple lines of that first article that set me down this freaking rabbit hole to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
The Psychology Today article talked about how there is a... Actually, let me find the line for you. Because it... Not that it offended me, but I thought it was incredibly rude. There is a concerning trend of more atheists getting into mental health fields which is especially concerning for all and will be a detriment. People struggling with mental health everywhere. And it's like, excuse me, what does me not believing in your book have to do with me working in the mental health field? Like, it didn't click until I started looking into what was going on behind the scenes in the political realm, that there's this big push from I don't know who thinking that religion and mental health should be separated, except when you're going to talk about the good things that religion does.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like, my biggest issue was that when I, in college, went out looking for a therapist, I was told to pray.
Oh, boy.
This was my first time meeting said therapist. I will call him Mr. Snuggles because he was a very prickly man.
Okay.
So I sat with him. I told him about the basics of my childhood. Oh, my dad's dead. My parents were never technically a couple. My grandmother raised me and died slowly in front of me from cancer. I'm currently in college, and I'm struggling by thinking I'm not worthy enough to live. And he looked at me, deadpan, and said, pray. I didn't tell him that I have a grandfather who's a cult leader. I hadn't told him that I was learning biblical Hebrew, and I was currently reading the Upanishads, which is a Buddhist text. So I could have been whatever religion. I could have been part of a cult for all this man knew. I could have been part of, like, some weird alien beam me up Scotty thing.
Yeah, you can say Scientology. I think that's okay.
I don't want to disappear tomorrow.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, like...
Well, you said aliens, and, like, Scientology is
you knew what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But, like,
Tom Cruise is gonna knock on your door.
It made me so uncomfortable, because I was currently wearing a headdress that day, because I had really messed up my hair. It was really frizzy. Now, I wasn't wearing it as an actual hijab. You could see some of my hair, but I had it covered. For anybody who's going to ask, I had tried using foam rollers, and it went sideways, and I didn't have time to wash my hair.
Oh boy!
So I had to hide my hair. So I had a headdress on.
Yeah.
So I probably looked like I was Muslim, and he was going to tell me to pray.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, you shouldn't make that assumption. Now, if he knew that I had grown up Catholic, okay, maybe that would have been helpful. But what if I was showing symptoms of bipolar disorder, which does run in my family, which I was scared that I had at the time? What if there was something bigger going on, and he didn't take the time to do his damn job as a therapist to figure out what I actually needed?
No.
He jumped straight to, this is my religion, this is what I should give to you. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't talk about religion in therapy.
Yeah.
That should be fine. But when the assumption is that is always the correct answer, it is incredibly dangerous. And so the fact that there's this assumption out there that's on psychologytoday.com saying that atheists shouldn't be in there and not even give an explanation for why it's bad that atheists would be in there, it's mind-boggling to me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to hurt anybody's mental health. I started a podcast to try to help.
Right.
Damn it.
Yeah. It's Joel Osteen calling. We just got banned.
Oh, yep.
Yeah.
I guess we got to end here, guys. We got banned by Joel Osteen. Maybe we'll pick it up in a part 2 next week. Maybe we won't. We're going to talk about it off air.
I would like to do part 2 because there was more to the story. Because I don't want to end on like a doom and gloom, like, oh, my church, like, mistreated me. Because it does get better.
I mean, everything gets better if you try.
Yeah.
So we'll pick up next week. Last minute advice. You first.
All authority is not God ordained, no matter who tells you in what context. People should earn your trust and respect.
And if your therapist is trying to push a religion on you, find a new therapist. Unless they're trying to talk you out of a cult. Yeah. All right. See you guys next week. Bye.
Join the conversation. Find us on social media at It's Working Podcast or link below.
Thanks for listening, and we hope you join us next week.
Be kind to yourself and to others.
What does it mean to be
Do you shudder internally when you witness a Karen going off on some innocent service industry worker?
Do you consume bad fan fiction and or have tattoos from your favorite TV shows?
Do you strain to listen in on the awkward date stories of strangers?
Is your family the worst and you just don't want to feel alone?
Then we might have the podcast for you. Cringe With Me, the podcast where we dig up the cringiest articles, questions, and tidbits of human culture to review with you, our listeners, so you can cringe with me.
Look up Cringe With Me on your favorite podcast directory.
Tell me what